She made a young man cry as she watched him lose his job, and she smiled. For 10 years, this billionaire's wife terrorized everyone she met. Nobody dared to challenge her. Nobody even tried. Until the day a broke waitress with nothing left to lose discovered her darkest secret. This is the true story of how one woman brought down a monster, not with money or power, but with a single word. And I promise you, by the end of this story, you'll never look at powerful people the same way again. This is a story about revenge? No, it's about something far more powerful than that. Stay with me. Welcome to Voice of Granny. While you are here, please hit the subscribe button and comment your view on the story and where you're watching from. Let me tell you a story about power, secrets, and what happens when someone finally says enough. In the heart of London, there was a restaurant called the Golden Rose. Not just any restaurant, mind you. This was the kind of place where a single meal could cost more than most people earn in a month. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling like frozen waterfalls. The silverware was actual silver. Even the air felt expensive. And in this world of luxury and whispers, there was one name that made everyone freeze. Victoria Ashford. She was the wife of Lawrence Ashford, a billionaire who owned half the tech companies in Europe. His money built towers that touched the sky. But Victoria? She built something different. She built an empire of fear. Every Friday night at 8 o'clock, she would arrive. Always in the same corner booth. Always dressed like royalty. And always ready to destroy someone's life if they dared to displease her. The staff would literally shake when she walked in. They'd seen what she could do. There was Thomas, a young man saving money for university, fired on the spot because his sleeve accidentally brushed near her plate. She didn't just get him fired. She watched him cry as he removed his uniform, and according to those who were there, she smiled. That's the kind of person Victoria Ashford was. Now, into this world walked a woman named Rachel Bennett. Rachel was 32 years old, and 3 months ago, her life had fallen apart. She'd been working as a research assistant for one of London's best investigative journalists. She loved that job. She was good at it too, finding facts that others missed, connecting dots that seemed impossible to connect. But then the newspaper shut down her department. Budget cuts, they said. And just like that, her dream was gone. So there she was, adjusting the stiff collar of a waitress uniform, trying to remember which side to serve the bread from, feeling like she'd fallen from the sky and landed in a completely different universe. On her first day, an older waiter named George pulled her aside. George had worked at the Golden Rose for 15 years. His face showed every one of those years. "See that booth?" he whispered, pointing to the corner. "That's where she sits. Victoria Ashford, wife of Lawrence Ashford, the billionaire. You know him, right?" Rachel nodded. Everyone knew Lawrence Ashford. He was in the news constantly. His companies were changing the world. "Well, his wife," George continued, his voice dropping even lower, "she's our worst nightmare. One wrong move, one tiny mistake, and she'll have you fired. And she won't stop there. She'll make sure you never work in a decent restaurant again. I've seen her ruin people just for fun." Rachel felt her stomach twist. Is she really that cruel? George's laugh was bitter. Last month, she claimed a waiter's presence was contaminating her food. He hadn't even touched her plate. Just stood nearby. She made such a scene that he was fired immediately. I heard he had to move back to his hometown because he couldn't find work anywhere else in London. That night, Rachel watched Victoria Ashford arrive. She moved like a queen entering her throne room. Her dress probably cost more than Rachel would earn in a year. Diamonds sparkled at her throat, cold and brilliant. But it was her eyes that Rachel noticed most. They were ice blue, sharp, calculating. They swept across the room like searchlights, and Rachel could actually see people flinch when that gaze passed over them. Victoria's husband, Lawrence, walked beside her. He was a tall, distinguished man with gray at his temples. But he looked tired, defeated, like a man trapped in a beautiful prison. Rachel was assigned to work near their table. Close enough to see everything. Close enough to hear. For the first hour, she focused on her own customers, trying to learn the complicated dance of fine dining. But she couldn't help overhearing Victoria's voice. It was soft, controlled, but it cut like a knife. She sent back her wine because she claimed it had a common taste. She complained that the lighting made her husband look old. Every complaint was a test, a way to remind everyone around her that she had power and they had none. Then came the moment that changed everything. A nervous young waiter named Daniel was serving the table next to the Ashfords. As he leaned in to place a dish in front of a customer, his sleeve, just for a fraction of a second, hovered above the edge of Victoria's bread plate. He didn't touch it. He wasn't even close. But Victoria recoiled like he'd tried to poison her. "Excuse me," she said. 2 words. That's all it took to make the entire restaurant go silent. Daniel froze, his face going white. "Yes, Mrs. Ashford? Do you see what you just did? Your sleeve was over my plate. Over my food. It's contaminated now. I've lost my appetite completely." She pushed her barely touched meal away with one finger, like it was garbage. The manager appeared within seconds, apologizing, offering to remake everything. Daniel stood there, trembling, looking like a man facing execution. Rachel watched the whole scene. This wasn't about hygiene or food. This was about power. This was a public execution designed to remind everyone of their place in Victoria's world. And as Rachel stood there with a water pitcher in her hands, watching this cruel performance, she felt something ignite in her chest. It was the same feeling she'd had working as a researcher, the same fire that burned when she saw injustice, when she saw someone abusing their power. George had called this place the Dragon's Lair. He was right, but what he didn't know was that Rachel Bennett had spent 3 years of her life learning how to find the cracks in Dragon's armor. And this dragon, she suspected, had more cracks than anyone realized. A week later, fate put Rachel directly in Victoria Ashford's crosshairs. It was another Friday night. The restaurant was packed with London's elite, people dripping in wealth and privilege. And then came the announcement that made Rachel's blood run cold. The waiter assigned to Victoria's table had called in sick. The manager, Mr. Pemberton, stood in the staff area looking like a general choosing a soldier for a suicide mission. His eyes landed on Rachel. "Bennett," he said quietly, "you're calm under pressure. You're on table 12 tonight." Table 12. Victoria's table. Rachel heard the sympathetic murmurs from the other staff. George caught her eye and shook his head slowly, a silent warning. But Rachel just nodded. "Yes, sir." She spent the next 15 minutes preparing like she was going into battle. She memorized every detail from Victoria's file. Still water, no ice, with a paper-thin slice of lime. Bread basket with only sourdough rolls. Everything had to be perfect, or it would be used as a weapon against her. When the Ashfords arrived, Rachel was ready. She approached their table with calm confidence. "Good evening, Mr. and Mrs. Ashford. My name is Rachel, and I'll be serving you tonight." Victoria's cold blue eyes swept over her, assessing, dismissing. She didn't even acknowledge the greeting. "Still water. Lime," she said curtly, already looking at her menu. Rachel executed everything perfectly. The water was presented correctly. The bread basket contained only what Victoria wanted. For a moment, Rachel thought she might actually survive the night. Then Victoria ordered the French onion soup. When Rachel placed the bowl in front of her 10 minutes later, it was still steaming, the cheese perfectly melted and golden. Rachel had watched the chef prepare it herself. Victoria stared at it for a long moment. Then she picked up her spoon, dipped it in, raised it halfway to her lips, and stopped. She lowered the spoon slowly. Her eyes narrowed. "Is there a problem in the kitchen tonight?" she asked, her voice carrying to the nearby tables. Rachel's heart began to beat faster. "Not at all, Mrs. Ashford. Is something wrong with the soup?" "It's cold," Victoria announced loudly. "Completely cold. I expect my soup to be hot. Is that really so difficult to understand?" Rachel knew the soup wasn't cold. She'd seen the steam rising from it. But this wasn't about the soup. This was the test. This was Victoria's way of establishing dominance, waiting for Rachel to panic, to grovel, to break. Instead, something interesting happened. Rachel's mind shifted into the mode she knew so well from her journalism days. She observed. She analyzed. Victoria wasn't angry. She was expectant. She was waiting for fear, for the reaction that would prove her power. Rachel decided not to give it to her. "I apologize, Mrs. Ashford," Rachel said, her voice perfectly calm and professional. "I'll have a fresh, piping hot bowl brought to you immediately." She reached for the bowl, but Victoria placed her hand over it, her manicured nails clicking against the porcelain. "No, don't bother. The moment is ruined." She looked at her husband. "You see, Lawrence? The standards here are falling. Completely falling." Lawrence Ashford just sighed, staring at his drink. He'd heard this song before. "It's just soup, Victoria," he said quietly. "It is never just soup, Lawrence," she snapped back. "It's about standards. Standards this waitress clearly doesn't understand." Her gaze returned to Rachel, sharp as broken glass. "What did you say your name was?" Rachel, Mrs. Ashford. Rachel. Victoria repeated the name like it tasted bad. Well, Rachel, I suggest you learn the difference between hot and cold if you expect to last another day in this establishment. The threat hung in the air like smoke. People at nearby tables were watching now, their conversations forgotten. This was the entertainment they'd come to see. Rachel held Victoria's gaze. She didn't flinch. She didn't look away. I understand completely, Mrs. Ashford. Thank you for the feedback. I'll ensure the rest of your meal is perfect. She took the bowl and walked to the kitchen, her steps measured and calm. She could feel every eye in the room on her back. But here's the thing about Rachel's response. Her calm, her refusal to panic, it wasn't what Victoria expected. An emotional outburst would have been a victory. Tears would have been a trophy. But this quiet, professional acceptance of a baseless complaint? This was something else. This was a refusal to play the game by Victoria's rules. When Rachel reached the kitchen, the head chef, Antoine, looked at her with fury in his eyes. That soup was perfect, he hissed. I checked the temperature myself. That woman is a monster. I know, Rachel said quietly. But she's not angry about the soup. For the rest of the meal, Victoria barely spoke to Rachel. She communicated through cold looks and dismissive gestures. But Rachel noticed something interesting. Victoria kept glancing at her, a flicker of irritation in those ice-blue eyes. She was frustrated. Her prey hadn't behaved correctly. As the Ashfords were leaving, Lawrence paused beside Rachel for just a moment. He pressed a folded bill into her hand discreetly, not meeting her eyes. I'm sorry about that, he mumbled. She's under a lot of stress. Rachel watched them leave. The bill in her hand felt heavy, guilty. She looked at it later. 200 pounds. But this wasn't about stress. Rachel knew that now. This was about power. About control. About a woman who had built her entire identity on making others afraid. And Rachel Bennett, who had spent years investigating powerful people, wasn't afraid. She was curious. And for someone like Victoria Ashford, curiosity was far more dangerous than fear. Because curious people ask questions. They dig. They find things that were meant to stay buried. Rachel had a feeling Victoria Ashford had a lot buried in her past. That encounter with Victoria lit a fire inside Rachel. Not anger. Not revenge. But something deeper. A need to understand. In her journalism days, her mentor had taught her something important. The cruelest people often live in the most fragile houses built on lies. You just have to find the right crack. So Rachel started looking. Her investigation didn't begin on the internet. It began right there in the Golden Rose, among the staff. Restaurants are like libraries full of stories. And this one was full of stories about Victoria Ashford. During quiet moments in the staff room that smelled of coffee and cleaning supplies, Rachel listened. Remember when she claimed the wine expert was insulting her by suggesting an Italian wine? One waiter recalled. Said it was a comment about her taste, which made no sense to anyone. What about when she made the hostess change her lipstick in the middle of service? Another added. Said it was too bright, too inappropriate. The poor girl cried in the bathroom. Rachel listened to every story, looking for patterns. And she found one. Victoria was obsessed with appearances, with performing a very specific role. The sophisticated old money wife. Any crack in that performance sent her into a rage. This suggested something important. She wasn't confident. She was terrified. One quiet Tuesday night, Rachel leaned against the bar where George was polishing glasses. You've been here the longest, George, she said casually. What was Victoria like when she first started coming here? George paused, his cloth circling the rim of a wine glass. Different, he said slowly. Or maybe trying to be the same but not quite pulling it off. This was about 10 years ago, right after she married Lawrence. She was nervous, always watching other people, copying how they held their forks, how they pronounced French words. She was learning, playing a part. He leaned closer, lowering his voice. And here's the strange thing. Before she married Lawrence, nobody had ever heard of her. I've worked at every high-end restaurant in London for 20 years. I know all the wealthy families. But Victoria Ashford? She just appeared out of nowhere when she got engaged. Like she didn't exist before that. A woman with no past. That night, Rachel went home to her tiny apartment and opened her laptop. She started where any good investigator would, public records. She searched for Victoria's maiden name, which was supposedly Victoria Sterling from a wealthy family in Bath. The results were thin. A few women with that name existed, but none matched Victoria's age or background. It was like the name had been invented. So Rachel changed tactics. She searched news archives from 10 years ago, looking for the announcement of Lawrence and Victoria's engagement. She found it in all the major papers. The articles all said the same thing. Whirlwind romance, shared love of charity work, Victoria's quiet, respectable background. Too neat. Too polished. Too perfect. Rachel started looking at photos from charity events Lawrence had attended before meeting Victoria. If she'd been part of that world, her name would appear somewhere. Hours passed. Nothing. Frustration built in her chest. She was chasing a ghost. Then she had an idea. She opened a reverse image search tool and uploaded one of Victoria's official photos from a charity gala 8 years ago. Most results showed the same image repeated across society websites. Useless. But then, on the 12th page of results, something appeared. A link to an old, barely functioning website for a talent agency in Manchester from the early 2000s. Rachel's hand trembled as she clicked it. The website was ancient, poorly designed, nearly broken. But on the client page, among dozens of hopeful faces, was a photo that made Rachel's breath stop. The girl was younger, maybe 22. Her hair was brassy blonde, overprocessed. She wore too much makeup, the kind that tried too hard. But the bone structure was unmistakable. The sharp jaw, the high cheekbones, the cold determination in her eyes. It was Victoria. But the name beneath the photo wasn't Victoria Sterling. It was Vicky Brightwell. Rachel felt electricity run through her body. The thrill of discovery. She ran a new search, Vicky Brightwell, Manchester. The results came flooding in. Local news articles from the early 2000s. A mention of her winning a local modeling competition. And then the jackpot. A link to a fan forum for an old reality television show from 2004 called Motorway Dreams. The show had followed young women who worked as promotional models for a car racing circuit. They were loud, dramatic, and desperately chasing fame. And one of the show's stars, known for her sharp tongue and explosive arguments, was a woman named Vicky Brightwell. Rachel clicked on a video link someone had uploaded. The video quality was terrible. But there she was, a younger, rougher version of Victoria Ashford, wearing tight jeans and a racing team jacket, screaming at another woman about borrowed makeup. Her accent wasn't the refined, almost aristocratic tone Victoria used now. It was pure working-class Manchester, rough around the edges. Rachel leaned back, her heart pounding. The elegant billionaire's wife was actually Vicky Brightwell from Manchester, a failed reality TV star who had completely erased her past. But Rachel needed more. She found the forum user who seemed to know the most about the show and sent a careful message, pretending to be a researcher writing about forgotten reality shows. 2 days later, she got a response. The user's real name was Beth Collins, and she'd gone to school with Vicky. They exchanged emails, then had a phone call. Beth's voice was warm but tinged with old resentment. "Vicky Brightwell," Beth said. "God, I haven't thought about her in years. She was so desperate to get out of Manchester. Hated everything about where she came from. Practiced posh accents in the mirror. Read fashion magazines like textbooks. What happened after the show?" Rachel asked. The show made her look cheap. Common. The exact opposite of what she wanted. She had a breakdown. Disappeared. Then years later, I saw her in a magazine, married to a billionaire, calling herself Victoria Sterling. She'd done it. Erased Vicky Brightwell completely. Rachel thanked Beth and hung up. She sat in the quiet of her apartment, the full picture now clear. Victoria's cruelty made sense now. Every time she humiliated a server, she was trying to destroy any reminder of Vicky Brightwell, the common girl she used to be. Rachel now held Victoria's deepest secret. The question was, what would she do with it? 3 weeks after the soup incident, Victoria Ashford returned. It was a Friday night, and when she walked through the door, tension rippled through the golden rose like electricity. But this time, something was different. She was alone. Lawrence wasn't with her. And she wasn't dressed in her usual elegant gown. She wore a severe black suit, all sharp angles and hard edges. She looked like she'd come for war. She didn't wait to be seated. She walked straight to her usual table, her cold eyes scanning the room until they found Rachel. She lifted one finger, a silent, commanding summons. Mr. Pemberton rushed forward to intercept, but Rachel shook her head slightly. This was inevitable. This had always been coming. Rachel smoothed her apron and walked to the table. "Good evening, Mrs. Ashford," she said calmly. Victoria didn't return the greeting. She gestured to the chair across from her. "Sit." Rachel hesitated. Servers never sat with customers. I'm on duty, Mrs. Ashford. Sit, Victoria repeated, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. Or I will buy this restaurant by tomorrow morning and turn it into a car park. Your choice. Rachel sat, her back straight, meeting Victoria's gaze steadily. The restaurant watched, confused by this bizarre scene. I don't know what game you think you're playing, Victoria began, leaning forward, her blue eyes burning. I don't know how you found out that name, or what you think you're going to do with it. But let me make something very clear. She paused, her voice becoming quieter, more deadly. I have had my husband's legal team investigate you completely. I know about your failed journalism career. I know about your debts. I know about the tiny flat you can barely afford. You are nobody. She leaned back, a cruel smile crossing her face. By the time I'm finished with you, you won't be able to get a job cleaning toilets. I will personally call every potential employer. I will tell them you're a thief, a blackmailer, and unstable. I will sue you until you're drowning in legal fees. I will destroy every corner of your pathetic little life. Do you understand me? Rachel listened to the threats without flinching. This was the dragon's fire, the desperate attempt to burn down the threat. But Rachel wasn't afraid anymore, because she knew what the dragon was hiding. She leaned forward slightly, her voice soft but carrying steel. You're right about one thing, Rachel said. I am a researcher, and I'm very, very good at my job. I know you're not Victoria Sterling from Bath. I know you're Vicky Brightwell from Manchester. Victoria's face tightened, but she held her ground. Lies. I know about motorway dreams, Rachel continued, her voice dropping lower. I know about the racing circuit. And I know about the finale. The beauty pageant on the track. The one where you had a complete breakdown on camera. At the mention of the pageant, Victoria's composure shattered. The blood drained from her face. Her breath came in short, ragged gasps. This was a direct hit. I know about the tiara, Vicky, Rachel said, deliberately using the old name. I know about the screaming, the crying, the footage that never aired but still exists. The tape that shows exactly who you really are. Victoria stared at her, speechless. She looked not like a powerful billionaire's wife, but like the terrified girl from her past, her worst nightmare sitting right across from her. Rachel took control completely. Here's what's going to happen now, she said calmly. You're going to leave this restaurant. You're never coming back. You're not going to harass or threaten anyone on this staff ever again. You're going to leave all of us alone. She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. If I hear even a whisper of you causing trouble, I will find that tape. And I will release it. I will send it to every newspaper, every gossip website, every single person in your social circle. Lawrence might forgive you for being dramatic about soup. But I wonder how he'll feel when he sees his wife Vicky screaming about her cheap tiara on motorway dreams. Where are they now? Each word was a perfectly placed blow. For a long, terrible moment, Victoria just stared. The fear in her eyes slowly transformed into pure, undiluted hatred. But she was defeated. Completely defeated. The ghost Rachel had summoned was standing right behind her, and it wouldn't go away. Slowly, shakily, Victoria Ashford, or Vicky Brightwell, rose from the table. She didn't say a word. She didn't look at anyone. With whatever dignity she had left, she turned and walked out of the Golden Rose. The doors closed behind her. And just like that, the curse was broken. A stunned silence filled the dining room. Then, from the kitchen, quiet applause began. The staff who had suffered for years were finally free. Mr. Pemberton walked over to Rachel, his eyes wide with disbelief. I don't even know what to say, he whispered. Rachel finally let out a long breath she'd been holding. She stood up and picked up her water pitcher. Table 6 needs refills, she said with a small smile. George caught her eye from across the room and gave her a slow, respectful nod. Rachel had faced the dragon, and she'd won. Not with fire, not with fury, but with the quiet, undeniable power of truth. Because bullies, no matter how rich or powerful, are often just scared people hiding behind masks. And when someone finally has the courage to pull that mask away, the bully has nothing left. Victoria's reign of terror was over. And Rachel Bennett, the waitress who refused to be afraid, had done what no one else dared to do. She'd looked the monster in the eye and reminded her that she was human after all. Just a frightened girl from Manchester, wearing a costume that no longer fit. Let me tell you what happened after that night, because this is where the story really finds its meaning. The tale of what Rachel did spread through London's restaurant world like wildfire. Not the details, nobody knew those. But the fact that someone had finally stood up to Victoria Ashford and won? That became legend. Did you hear about the Golden Rose? Servers whispered in break rooms across the city. Someone finally put Victoria Ashford in her place. The story became bigger than the facts, as stories often do. But at its heart was a simple truth: courage matters. Standing up matters. Refusing to let bullies win matters. Victoria Ashford was never seen in that part of London again. She retreated into her mansion, a ghost in her own gilded cage, haunted by a past she could no longer control. Some people felt sorry for her. Rachel wasn't one of them. She had every advantage, Rachel told George one evening, a few weeks later. Money, privilege, opportunity. And she chose to use all of it to hurt people who couldn't fight back. That's not someone who deserves pity. That's someone who needed to be stopped. George nodded, polishing a glass. You did a brave thing, Rachel. A good thing. But Rachel didn't feel particularly heroic. She'd simply done what needed to be done. What someone should have done years ago. As for Rachel herself, she didn't stay a waitress for long. Her actions that night caught the attention of someone unexpected. A wealthy entrepreneur who'd been dining at the Golden Rose and witnessed the whole confrontation. His name was David Chun, and he owned a private investigation firm. A week after Victoria's departure, he approached Rachel with an offer. I've been watching how you handle yourself, he said over coffee. The way you think, the way you stay calm under pressure, the way you research and plan. Those are rare skills. I could use someone like you. Rachel stared at the business card he'd placed on the table. You want to hire me as an investigator? I want to hire you as my lead investigator, he corrected. The work you did uncovering Victoria Ashford's past? That's exactly what my clients need. People who can find the truth, no matter how deeply it's buried. Rachel looked at the card for a long moment. Then she smiled. A real, genuine smile. When do I start? 3 months later, Rachel was back doing what she loved. Investigating. Uncovering truth. Helping people who needed answers. But she never forgot her time at the Golden Rose. And she never forgot the lessons she'd learned there. Because here's the thing about bullies, whether they're in a school playground or a 5-star restaurant, they rely on silence. They rely on fear. They rely on people being too scared to speak up, too intimidated to fight back. Victoria Ashford had ruled through terror for years. Not because she was particularly clever or strong, but because no one had ever challenged her. One person standing up, one person refusing to be afraid, was all it took to bring the whole facade crashing down. Rachel thought about this often as she worked her new cases. How many tyrants in the world were just like Victoria? People hiding behind money or power or status, using it as a weapon to hurt others, all while desperately trying to hide their own insecurities? The answer, she discovered, was too many. But she also learned something else. For every bully, there were dozens of good people. People like George, who'd survived years of abuse but still showed up with dignity. People like Daniel, the young waiter who'd been humiliated but kept trying. People like the entire staff of the Golden Rose, who supported each other through impossible situations. Those people mattered more than the bullies. Those people were the real heroes. 6 months after leaving the Golden Rose, Rachel got a phone call that surprised her. It was Lawrence Ashford. Miss Bennett, he said, his voice quiet and tired. I wanted to thank you. Rachel was confused. Thank me? For what? For having the courage to do what I should have done years ago, he said. I knew what Victoria was doing. I knew she was cruel. But I told myself it wasn't my business, that it was just how she was. I made excuses. I let it continue. He paused, and Rachel could hear genuine pain in his voice. We're getting divorced. Finally. I should have done it years ago. But I was a coward. You showed me what courage actually looks like. After he hung up, Rachel sat quietly, thinking about his words. She hadn't set out to save a marriage or destroy one. She'd simply refused to let someone abuse their power. But sometimes that's all it takes to change everything. So let me leave you with this, because this is what the story is really about. You don't have to be rich to be powerful. You don't have to be famous to be brave. You don't have to be perfect to stand up for what's right. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply refuse to be afraid. Refuse to let bullies win. Refuse to stay silent when you see injustice. Rachel Bennett was just a waitress who'd lost her dream job. She had no money, no connections, no safety net. But she had something more important. She had integrity. She had courage. And she had the absolute certainty that cruelty should never go unchallenged. That was enough. More than enough. Because the truth is, most bullies are just scared people wearing masks. They're terrified that someone will see who they really are underneath all the money, the status, the performance. And when someone finally has the courage to look behind that mask, the bully has nothing left. Victoria Ashford spent years building a perfect image, crushing anyone who threatened it. But it was all built on lies. And lies, no matter how expensive they are, eventually crumble. The truth always finds a way out. And sometimes, all it takes is one person brave enough to speak it. That person could be anyone. It could even be you. The end.